Hey, Bastish B here for 64K and welcome to Golden Years. And a look at the early days of the Commodore 64 gaming scene from about 1982 to 1986, and particularly looking at the little companies that came and went in a flash, but left a real great mark on the C64 gaming scene. And this episode features the company Windham Classics, so let's learn a little bit more about their origins. Windham Classics was formed in 1984, but let's back it up a little bit first to understand the full story, which begins in 1982 with the formation of Spinnaker Software Corporation, who hailed from Cambridge, Massachusetts in the USA. Their focus was to provide low-cost educational software to the emerging microcomputer boom, focusing on the Atari 800, Apple II, and the Commodore 64. They were extremely successful, cornering the market pretty much for themselves in the early days, and by 1984 were ranked as the 16th largest software company in the world with $10 million worth of sales in 1983 alone. By 1984 it was a turning point, however, as they wanted to diversify their catalog, and they introduced a bunch of subsidiaries to the company. For gamers, two of them, namely Telerium and Windham Classics, are probably the most well known. Telerium's goal was to reach an older audience, but Windham Classics, today's focus, was aimed at kids, introducing full-on action-adventure games and graphic text adventures to a younger audience, all based on classic literary novels by the likes of L. Frank Baum, Lewis Carroll, and Robert Louis Stevenson, amongst more. By the end of 1984, Spinnaker had successfully launched 7 new subsidiaries to broaden their massive software market appeal. And now that we know a little bit more about the company, let's start looking at all their games starting in 1984. The official Windham Classics releases started in 1984 with the release of probably their most beloved game called Below the Root, which, like all of these, is based on a book, or in this case a series known as the Green Sky Trilogy, which started back in 1978 by Zilpha Keatley Snyder. What's interesting is that many of the fans were very dissatisfied how the story ended, with Zilpha acknowledging that and jumped at this opportunity to make a game which continues the story and provides many resolutions to plots that were never resolved. Therefore, this game can be thought of as a final chapter in the book series. The game itself is a combination of action, adventure, platformer, kind of a point-and-click adventure game, and some light RPG elements. Somehow though, this all manages to work very well, without it being overcomplicated at all. In its simplest terms, the story is about two opposing races that live in an underground society that have come together, although the tensions are still high. You receive a cryptic quest that the light is dying and the darkness is coming, which basically kickstarts the adventure. You can choose between 5 very distinct and different characters that have different races and abilities. All of this plays into how the game is played, the impact on the player, the people you talk to, and all the situations. You have access to a menu system, which is what you use to interact with people. You can talk to them, buy items, and obviously solve puzzles. This is an extremely well made and designed game that for 1984 packs in a crazy amount of content and depth into such a small package. Although Windham games were essentially designed for kids, this goes way beyond that with its clever interface and the sheer amount of detail. Designer of the game, Dale Descharoun, started off making educational games for Spinnaker. The excellent adventure creator was won by him, and of course 1985's Alice in Wonderland, which we'll get to shortly, as well as the games he's probably most famous or infamous for, the Philips CDI Legend of Zelda games. Their second 1984 release was called Swiss Family Robinson, based on the classic novel by Johann David Weiss from 1812, and follows the plot of the book pretty closely. The game is a hybrid graphic text adventure that has a very unique parser system that is easy to use and has a built-in book physically in-game, which you can read for words to use, and is generally very well done. And on top of the fact that the items also appear on screen as objects, which can be manipulated with an inventory bar below, so you're not simply relying on text and static background graphics. The story, like the book, has U.S. Fritz, the oldest son in the family that has been shipwrecked on a remote island somewhere in the East Indies. It's a survival game and adventure, as finding food, making shelter, and just generally trying to survive the dangers treasures of the island all come into play. I really like that there's a lot of unconventional elements in this game, making it much more than a standard graphic text adventure. You have access to an actual map in-game on the island, which is very useful for navigating, a full encyclopedia that you can reference at any time to find out information on plants and animals for clues, and also having animated graphics in certain areas to give the action a little bit more spice really helps elevate it above the run-of-the-mill. If you love the original story of the book, then this interpretation is going to be very enjoyable. And just as Windham was getting off the ground, 1985 gave us their last 3 releases and the bittersweet end. So let's jump straight into Treasure Island. Based on the 1883 novel by Robert Louis Stevenson, a big old grand adventure where you take the role of Jim Hawkins, a kid who through a series of events finds a treasure map and together with a real ragtag bunch of pirates heads out to a lost island to find the treasure. Unlike Swiss Family Robinson, which uses its own designed interface, Treasure Island is clearly using Spinnaker's Cell Parser interface, which they used in most of their sister company Tellurium's graphic text adventures, which is a good thing as it was very well designed. The only major negative here is the game is extremely linear and you really need to know the story of the book, or else sometimes you simply won't know what to do next. It is helpful though that the other characters can be asked for help, so they become the built-in hint system in a sense. Overall it's good, it's presented well, but it's definitely my least favorite of all the Windham C64 releases. And next we'll look at The Wizard of Oz, based on the Oz novels by L. Frank Baum, released originally in 1901. The game puts you in the role of Dorothy, who gets transported to the magical kingdom of Oz by a giant tornado from a home in Kansas. Your goal is to find the man behind the curtain and hopefully he can send you back home. This game also uses the Tellurium graphic text adventure engine and also relies on you knowing the basic stories of the books, or else things can get really tricky. The big difference here though is that you form a party of characters such as the Scarecrow, the Cowardly Lion and the Tin Man all joining you, and they are not simply NPCs, but you can ask them questions, get hints, but most importantly command them to do things, which helps solve puzzles, which most of them do require the help of your companions, which broadens the puzzle logic and is a pretty unique aspect of this adventure. I enjoyed it a lot more than Treasure Island, which feels a little bit mechanical at times, and it's presented really well graphically with enough extra set pieces added to the base story to make something interesting even if you've read the book multiple times. And I purposely saved my favorite game of theirs, for me anyway, for the end. 1985's Alice in Wonderland, designed yet again by Dale Descharon of Below the Root fame, and uses that game's basic engine but in a very different way to plot out another fascinating platform action adventure hybrid, unlike most games you regularly see on the C64. Plot-wise, it's not a beat-for-beat version of the novels, but it's a combo of remakes and its own tale, still with you playing Alice as she fumbles her way through Lewis Carroll's demented story, taking elements from 1865's Alice in Wonderland and its sequel 1871's Through the Looking Glass. The game has the same look and feel of Root, with the menu system being now tailored more towards pure puzzle solving, with all the RPG elements gone. Just like in the books, all the bizarre characters you meet talk in riddles, and many of the puzzles are solved by figuring out their meanings. You can also glide through areas with your umbrella and alter Alice's size just like the books to get through small areas, or grow tall to get to higher places to pick up objects. The game does have a timer, you have to complete it before the Red King awakes, and you'll notice clocks everywhere giving you an indication of how much more time you have. But as long as you keep saving it, it becomes kind of irrelevant, as you can always just backtrack a bit and complete tasks quicker once you understand the solutions. Overall, it's one of the most original games on the C64. Like Below the Root, there is hardly any games like this on the system, and that's saying something considering the C64's massive library of games. In 1987, Spinnaker decided to revamp its business model. They felt there was a big shift in the microcomputer business, with less sales from educational and entertainment products, as the IBM PCs of that era were being bought and used en masse in large companies. They therefore shut the doors on all their subsidiaries, which ended Windham Classics at the end of 1986, and focused exclusively on business and personal productivity software. Despite the high quality of the games, in the end, it all came down to pure business. And I hope you enjoyed that little look back at Windham Classics. Thanks for joining me, Bastish B at 64K. I hope you had a good time. And if you can please like and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!